Okay, let's get to the topics of the day. The first one, which Darren brought up, is comments comparing techniques and attitudes of practitioners in traditional Japanese Jiu-Jitsu versus Brazilian and MMA. And the second one was perception, what I summarized as perceptual and situational awareness. Where's safe and where's unsafe, but that'll be taken care of by Will. And then I'll cover body language that can make you a good or bad target. Anyway, so, and then if anything else comes up, we're free to tackle those. So anyway, let's go to Darren, and what was your thoughts behind the topic, and let's go with it.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My thoughts behind the topic is more of a, I guess I take it a little to heart, or a little bit more personal on how what traditional jiu-jitsu really is versus what in today's modern day, and how people's perception of what jiu-jitsu is and the popularity of Brazilian jiu-jitsu and how jiu-jitsu continues to evolve. I see these articles all the time, whether it's in Black Belt Magazine or any other publication that's out there, and all you see is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And now they're starting to try to, and Sensei Kirby and I had a conversation a couple of weeks back about an article that was in there about a book that was for sale. And the actual article is, and I wish I had it with me, I don't have it with me, but the actual publication for the book was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for the Streets. And my initial thought was, that's pretty interesting, because the last place that I want to be is on the floor when I'm trying to defend myself in the middle of the street. So that was pretty interesting. Then as I continued to read on it, and you can, and everyone, I'm sure Sensei Kirby will add to this, I was pretty fired up, because then as I continued to read, I didn't get to the picture yet, and then it said Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu self-defense for the streets. And I'm like, okay, again, it's still kind of saying the same thing, but my initial thought is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is basically for the floor, and not understanding how that was going to be a practical form of self-defense when you're trying to either get away from a threat or defend yourself in a real life situation in the street. And then I looked at the picture, and it had the person who was the author of the book, and it said Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for the streets, and they were using it as a knife defense. And they had a figure 4 lock on the arm with a restraint on, holding the knife. And I was like, well, yeah, why don't you just call it Japanese Jiu-Jitsu? And so that was my thing. I'm like, that's what the today's people that are, whether they're in a combative sport or mixed martial arts or self-defense, everyone has this perception, or now in today's time is starting to have this perception of what they think jiu-jitsu is, and they really don't have any education or knowledge or experience or any lineage historically about where jiu-jitsu has come from, and it being a Japanese art. So I wanted to get people's opinion on how they felt about that.
Okay, any thoughts before I lob a few shots in there?
Yeah, I totally agree, and get into debates frequently with BJJ guys that think that their art is the end-all be-all for anything, whether it's competition or self-defense or whatever. And my argument has always been that it's great for competition when you've got one opponent and a referee making sure everybody's following the rules. But if you're out on the street with no referee, no rules, other people are around you, you never know what the next guy's going to do. Or there's a video on YouTube of two teenagers, I think, wrestling on the ground, and one of them gets the other he's mounted and doing a ground and pound, and the kid on the bottom, the mother walks up and kicks him in the head, knocks him off the other guy. And there's probably countless videos like that online. I agree with you. The street's the last place you want to be. But unfortunately, I think because of the popularity of UFC, since it started back in '92, so there's a whole generation of people that only know it through UFC. that's an entertainment, right? So these guys make more money by being outrageous and being loud and arrogant. And look at Conor McGregor. I mean, they don't come much more arrogant than that guy, but he makes a ton of money. He's a good fighter. And so I think people think that that's the way you have to be. And I think nothing could be further from the truth in the real world.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree with you, Will. I think, the reality of any type of confrontation and it ending up on the ground is certainly a true reality for it to happen. I mean, it certainly can happen, and Japanese Jiu-Jitsu just offers every part of that. And the way I look at it all the time is you have Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. If you took this art of Jiu-Jitsu as a whole and you called it 100%, and then you took Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and yes, is it effective in competition? Is it effective in mixed martial arts? Yes, it is. It's extremely effective, and in fact, it's so effective that if you don't have that type of experience, if you don't have that type of training, then you're completely exposed to be able to compete at a high level in those combative sports that are governed by a referee and actually the other person that knows what's about to happen. Like, they know that you're about to have an altercation. You know that there's about to be a fight. You know what the other person is capable of and their experience levels. And in reality, you don't. You have no clue. You don't know what's going to be used. You don't know if it's going to be multiple attackers. You don't know if it's going to have weapons. You don't know if it's going to end up on the ground. If it's going to be standing on the feet. You don't know what the surprise elements are. And so I think that in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a very, very small fraction of what true Japanese Jiu-Jitsu is. And I would give it, in all due respect, I give it about 10% of what true Japanese Jiu-Jitsu is. And it's come from Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. And even their founders, the Brazilians, whether you say the Gracies or the Machados, and all due respect to them as well. But when you get those individuals, their grandfather has trained with, kind of who had created, that's where they got the art from. They were training with Japanese practitioners, and people just don't know that. And then, so they only have a small fraction, and they only use a small fraction. And yes, is it successful for them to compete in these regulated events? Absolutely is, and it's certainly a necessity. But in reality, they're missing a bunch.
Okay, any other? Go ahead.
I also want to make the same point. Like, is it Helio, whoever the grandfather is? He learned from Japanese Jiu-Jitsu and judo guys. That's where it came from.
Correct.
And then they decided to focus on the groundwork and the competition aspect of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, or before
I don't want this to sound like sour grapes, because I don't view them as competitors. I view them as coexisting with us. However, I take umbrage with the fact that some of the stats are kind of sketchy. When I hear time and again that 80% of fights go to the ground, when my best research is 42% go to the ground. And my own street situations that I found myself in through the years, I never once found myself on the ground in 7 different altercations that went physical. I've seen people on the ground fighting, but I've never personally been taken down that way in altercations. In 1992, the UFC won. This whole UFC thing operates under the auspices of the Boxing Commission. And it started out purely as a semi-replacement for boxing, which was going down in ratings, and this went up in ratings. So it was a moneymaker, plain and simple. So that's the only umbrage I take, is like, if the reality is approximately two-fifths of fights go to the ground, claiming 80% do that's 100%, near 100% exaggeration. I don't like exaggerations. I don't like inflated egos, and those are the 2 things I take umbrage with. Humility is just so important to team up with and demonstrate that you also might have a healthy amount of respect and integrity to go with that humility.
okay.
It's funny, you mentioned like 80% of fights going to the ground. It reminded me of one of my favorite quotes about statistics was from Scott Anderson in an article he either wrote for either Professor Kirby, either one of your newsletter or the AJA's, and it was like 73% of all statistics are made up.
on the spot.
Yeah, Dave, I agree, Dave. I believe that they're coexisting art, and it's a formidable system, and all due respect to them. And that's not my biggest issue with it. My biggest issue is the misconception of where Japanese jiu-jitsu, or what jiu-jitsu, where it has originated and the history behind it, and everyone thinking that it's a Brazilian art and it not being a Brazilian art. But all due respect to all systems and all jiu-jitsu out there, and they're certainly a part of everything that we do. But
I like
and then to follow.
I like to remind my students that the techniques we teach are the ones that worked because the people that used them survived to teach them. The ones that didn't work, they didn't survive, so they never got taught.
Right. Hey, Dave, so when I was up in Japan, and I was at the Imperial Palace, and I have all these displays of different wars and battles and everything like that. And you look at the samurai and how they were, having to be able to fight against each other to survive, really, for whatever reason that they were in war for or battle. And I took a picture of it because it was at one point where they had the organizational infrastructure of where jiu-jitsu had originated. And obviously it started with Japanese jiu-jitsu, and then it down to Aikido, and then Hapkido, and then it filtered down, branched off into like a tree, and then it ultimately gets down to Brazilian jiu-jitsu. But I took a screenshot of that, and I posted that at one time, and I'm like, where do you see the ground fighters at? Because the only people that are on the ground haven't survived.
Yeah.
I'd love to see that photo if you still have it.
Yeah, I do. I'll dig it up for you, Will.
Yeah, I'd like to see it too, just for historical purposes.
Yes.
Anyone else have any thoughts offhand or comments?
Well, I do. I've had recently, I get some of us started, well, of course, it's been stopped and started because of the pandemic, but we joined, because the Y was closed, we joined a gym that offers judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which is to me, that's nice because you get the transition point from the ground. I mean, from standing to the ground. And I was pretty particular about the place I wanted to try because Will was talking, I believe, about humility, and a lot of those places, the brojos, very testosterone driven. I had no interest. I'm 64 years old. I have no interest in that. This place is relatively enlightened, and I think the judo helped me. Again, you have that transition going to the ground, and I just view the ground as a medium, a possible medium. You may wind up on the ground. It's nice to know a little bit what to do if you do want, you get knocked down and someone jumps on top of you. And I think one of the Gracies, gosh, there's like a bazillion of them out there. I'm not even sure they are all real Gracies. Probably a lot of Gracie impersonators. But one of them said that inevitably Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is going to go back to its roots a bit because of its self-defense limitations. And some BJJ types are gonna be curious, darn, I can't do squat when two people attack me. And you remember the first time you simulated multiple attackers? It's a whole different ball game. It's like, it's totally different. You have to, there's more stop kicks and stuff like that all of a sudden. But so I think it's like the old saying, it's not the style, it's the dojo. And I think if you find the right one, it can be a nice complement to what we do. Not a substitute by any means.
Okay, let me step in here. One of the, having done some books with respect to the titling that Darren brought up, which Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Street Defense. Many times, I have no idea what the original title for that book was going to be, but most of my book titles have been changed from my original concept to what the publisher thought would sell more books. And sometimes their title turned out to be better than my idea. So, it's a PR thing. I do know that the goal of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to get the person down to the ground where they are really good at, as long as there's no other attackers around. And so I would assume that a good BJJ sensei would teach techniques that would help the student learn how to take an attacker down to the ground. Because if you don't take them down to the ground, you can't do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So it's that's their emphasis, and the street is as Darren said, it's an attention getter. So the person will pick up the book and say, "Oh, I got to get this because now here's a book on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that'll work on the street." And my perception of it is all it's really doing is getting that attacker down to the ground. Because if you can't get, like I said, you've got to get them down to the ground to do your thing. So that's that problem. I think,
in my experience, people that come in the dojo from a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu system, not only are they surprised about the variety or the expansion of variety of techniques that are available to them that they're limited to. And again, with all due respect, they're very, very, very good on the ground. But the limitations that they have when they're like, wait, where did that come from? Much less the simple fact of how do I even get you to the floor so I can do something? Because like, wait, you're starting standing up? What is this?
right.
Or then how do they fall to be able to get up and do it again? Like they have no clue, zero.
Right. No, I agree with you 100%. That's the limitation. When I was teaching jiu-jitsu at the local junior college, inevitably every semester I'd get one or two people who wanted to do MMA or Brazilian jiu-jitsu with me. And I said, okay, I'm going to put you in a wrist press, where the elbow is on the ground and you're pushing down the wrist, and I'd have it about there on the ground. I said, if you can get out of this submission, I'll go to the ground with you and do groundwork. Okay. And they would flip back and forth like a fish or God knows what. But you have a lot of control in terms of how much pain you can generate before you actually injure a person. And I never had to worry about, I never had to go to the ground with anything because they'd finally give up and tap out. But what they did, and then I'd say simply, this is what traditional jiu-jitsu is. It's controlling the other person. There is a limitation, and you run into that. I've run into sometimes with judo people, they'll say, you can't do a hip throw that way, and that's the way we do hip throws. They'll counter. I think part of the problem is that the arts that have broken off from jiu-jitsu, as Byron said, and I think Will said, is they've taken a slice of jiu-jitsu and saying this is what we're going to perfect. And they have it's a very structured system. Things can only be done in certain ways, and they're given names, and that's what you do, and there's a referee, and the world continues to turn within this little slice of the pie. But then you go to jiu-jitsu, and this deals with aikido, judo, kempo, some other styles of karate, hapkido possibly. But then you go to jiu-jitsu, and it's taitoshi. Oh, we have a dozen ways of doing a drop throw. Or, and there's no Seki frustrated people up the wall because he'd show when he'd say, tonight we're going to work on taitoshi, new students thought, oh, we're going to do this. And he'd show, well, there's this. And he'd show like a whole slew of variations and have us try them all. And he says, you're going to find one that works best for you. And I think that's the difference. Our problem with traditional jiu-jitsu is that we have so much to teach. But the the other side of the coin is once you get that down, usually around brown belt, you really become unpredictable on the street. I've had several students that have been in street situations. Only one of them went down to the ground, and that was to set a hold. I mean, a lock. There's a wrist press, you know, with a person on their stomach, and he stood like, you know, this guy stood like 6'20", and I don't know how short his attacker was, but that's the only, I've never had any other student go down to the ground on the street. Usually the fact, as Darren points out, the fact that the person doesn't know how to fall, they usually end up getting injured when they hit the ground. And that if the technique didn't disable the person, the ground did. And I think that flexibility is what's to our advantage. But how do you say, the other arts don't have that flexibility. We're really open-ended, and that's the advantage we have, and we don't really tout that. I mean, part of the success of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and MMA is their marketing skills. It's a time in history where everybody's got, you know, you can see this stuff on TV, you can see it on your smartphone, you can see it, you can go to YouTube and watch it, all this stuff that's easily accessible. It reminds most adult males of when they were kids and wrestled around, which I really enjoyed doing. I mean, you know, I enjoyed wrestling when I was a kid. Most kids do. It's just, to me, it's part of growing up. And this allows, how do you say it, adult males to continue their quote unquote endeavor, albeit in a more regulated manner. But I think the problem is, as Darren brought up and Will brought up, is that it's a limited slice of the pie. And sometimes they're lost. I think I mentioned in the previous meeting, I was when I was working out at a gym for a while, and up on the second floor, there were two guys that were, turned out they were, I think, BJJ, and one was trying to grab the other person's legs, and the other one was trying to keep him from it. And they were both down in sort of a squat. So the one that didn't have his legs grabbed, I said to him simply, why don't you grab the back of his shorts, lie down into him and pull him over you. And he looked at me like, you can't do that. And I said, do it. And he did.
That was against the rules.
It's against the rules. The guy went over him. And I just walked away. You know, that's how do you say it? I think to me, part of the other part, and this has to do with the PR that they use and the chest thumping. I think that's, how do you say, that's an essential part of their, I don't want to say, I guess I could say advertising ploy. We are better, we are stronger, we are successful. And they push that, and enough people believe that. And it looks good in the ring because no one's getting injured. I mean, okay, yeah, they may get injuries, but it's not to the extent where we might injure a person out of necessity, because no one would allow what we do. I think back in the 70s, I forget who it was trying to get full contact jujitsu okayed in California. And the wrestling commission said, Boxing commission said, because it's too dangerous. They said people are going to get injured. And, you know, so that went by the wayside. And back in the 60s and late 60s, Seki ran jujitsu tournaments. And the only thing you couldn't do was hit a person in the face. And there were a lot of injuries. And of course, back in the 60s, if you got into a martial art and got injured, that was your own stupid fault. But anyway, I think the point is that on the one hand, they've got much better, they've got much better PR than Jiu-Jitsu does. We're kind of like, I would almost say we're a step above or step equal with Aikido in terms of we're just there. And we do our thing. I know with the Parks program, you have a constant enrollment. And I don't know what the, belt rank or whatever they call it, promotion requirements are in Brazilian or MMA. I don't know if as much is expected of them as it is in Jiu-Jitsu. So.
That was another thing, Sensei. That was a great point about their how they evaluate their progress to be eligible for a higher level. A tremendous amount of them, and I'm not saying every single one of them, but a tremendous amount of those programs, they promote based off of participation in events. And if you're successful or even halfway successful in an event, they'll award you another belt. They'll right there. They promote you on the spot. I've had multiple people tell me from those type of systems that they would even question, like, wait, I don't even know all of this material right here. How am I being promoted? And the reason why they were being promoted is just because they won a medal or a trophy and participating in one of the events that probably had two other people that were competing that had less experience than them, which was zero.
Yeah, and I've seen that some with martial arts. If you're a green belt and you go out on the mat and you if you're 6Q and you go out on the mat, you have some sort of randori and you beat a 5th Q or 4th Q, then bang, you're 4th Q. I think that's more due to the luck of the draw than anything else. But then I've seen on the other hand, I've even done it as a result of competition, where if a person, let's say a purple belt, takes first place when we used to have freestyle tournaments, and their performance was just absolutely exceptional. We promote them up a rank if the judges felt it was appropriate at the end of the tournament. And on a rare occasion, they'd say, "Well, I haven't learned all the techniques," and my comment was, "You will." But it's. I think promotions in martial arts is a whole different issue anyway, because different organizations and different systems have different criteria, and it's hard to compare. I will say, and this is one of the things that I've always really liked about traditional jiu-jitsu, is that you put a bunch of brown and black belts together of different brew of jiu-jitsu, and within a couple of minutes, they're all working out with each other, and because they all have a common core, they basically all know the same techniques. Somehow all the sensei, without the senseis getting together at some higher level, they've all managed to teach the same techniques roughly the same way, and it works. And that's one of the really nice things about traditional jiu-jitsu. Once you get past the terminology in either English or Japanese, and once you get past variations, it's all the same. And I think, as Darren and Will both said, it goes to the depth of the art itself. Anyway.
Just one thing I'd like to toss in here. again, just kind of taking a view from not 500 feet, but from 5,000 feet, when you look at on the surface, self-defense is about fighting. But one of the things I truly appreciate about having studied with you through the years and what I see in my fellow traditional Japanese Jiu-Jitsu sensei is that the study of self-defense is much more than just about fighting. It's about character development. And I enjoyed that growth in myself as well as seeing it in my students. And I consciously work towards instilling that in my students and reminding them from time to time, here's an opportunity for you to do thus and such. Tony D'Amigo, I think, said it best, and I put it in front of our dojo handbook. The first quote right up front, and he said, Jiu-Jitsu is not about retribution or the dealing out of punishment. In a nutshell, it's about overcoming adversity without losing our humanity. And I just toss that out there and say that from a standpoint of developing the character development aspects in our teaching and our learning, I think traditional Japanese Jiu-Jitsu hits the nail on the head with a 13-pound sledgehammer.
Yes, I would agree with you. It is, and I think we do this more by example as sensei than in any way in how we treat our students. Even when I was a classroom in a regular classroom, I always treated my kids with respect. I was always straightforward with them. If they had a problem, I'd take the time to listen. Couldn't always offer them a solution that was in their best interest, but I could give them options. And it's like being a parent. You have that as a sensei, you have that responsibility to help your students become better people. And it really shouldn't matter what you teach. That's just part of the responsibility of being a parent or a teacher. And yeah, I think that's there. I also think that different, and I've even seen it in traditional jiu-jitsu, there are a couple of ryu that are, how do you say it? I think it's more individuals, whether they become arrogant or not, as compared to systems or ryu. And I think that's unfortunate because it misrepresents the art, whatever they're teaching. It's like, how do you say it? We had a teacher at one of the schools I taught at who, I mean, he was an art teacher. He was a fantastic art teacher. But if you looked at his rule book, boys got C's and D's, girls got A's and B's. And there are no grades to substantiate that. And he would become very defensive. And he treated the, he had a lot of problems in his class, let me put it bluntly, because of his attitude towards the kids. But that doesn't mean that art is bad. And like I've said, and Dave said, as an instructor, you have a responsibility. And if you're beating your chest all the time, your students are going to beat their chests until someone knocks their teeth out. And then they won't beat their chest any longer. But that's, you don't want to give it, I say, you don't want to give a student a false sense of confidence.
Reminds me of something that Bruce Lee had said, when asked what the best martial art was, he said, well, there's no martial art that's better than others. There's just better martial artists. Right. It's the practitioner that's better, not the art or the style.
I agree with you.
So that kind of goes with the instructor being better and teaching a better full art to his students.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. All the martial arts are good. but it's the individual practitioner that what they do with it that makes it successful. And
I'd say here's one of the pictures right here. I'm gonna put it on the screen. I'll email it to you later on. You could share with everyone else. I don't know if everyone could see it or not. Is that like kind of lined up in the right spot?
okay. Okay.
Oh, wow.
And then here's I'll send that. I'll share that with you. And then here's a little bit of a.
There you go.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Those of you who don't know, now you do.
I mean, you know,
It's,
I- yes, gotta send those out. I mean, I've done seminars in karate dojo. And the most common comment was, I didn't know you could do that way. Or I didn't know you could do that for that kind of attack. And how do you say it? And I don't want to knock any particular martial art, but again, it's because it's only a slice of the pie. Students only learn so much, and I'll constantly, probably 2-3 times a year, I'll get people who ask me, how many years will it take me to get my black belt? And I'll say, well, it depends on how much time you can put into practice, how fast you can learn, how intelligent you are. For an average person, it's about 4 to 7 years. And they say, oh, thank you. And that's the last I see of them. I have seen some people do it in 2 or 3 years. If they're really well coordinated, they can put in, 5 to 10 hours a week worth of, mat time, practice time. If you don't have anything else to do with your life, you can learn surprisingly fast. But the realities of the world get in the way.
You're going to be picking me up around 10:30 at the nail salon.
Oh, okay. So anyway, I have to pick up my wife at 10:30 at the nail salon. So, in case you're wondering what the side talk was. In any case, so I lost my thought pattern here.
The claws came out.
Pardon?
The claws came out. The nail salon.
Call you.
I know, I heard you, not you.
That can be an effective style.
Yeah, I think, and I think that's the issue, is that they're trying to look good with what they have, realizing that if they go someplace, they might learn something else, and that'll come back into their dojo and cause problems. I've run seminars up here, and I know one karate instructor who we used to have like a karate dojo in every corner up here when I moved up here in '94. And then we ended up having kung fu studios on every corner. And that lasted a few years. And then we had, now we've got BJJ, and more popular now than BJJ is MMA on every street corner. And this karate instructor, one of his students showed up at one of my seminars, and I said, why don't more of your students come? And he said, because the sensei told us that if any of us came to your seminar, we were not allowed back into their class. I said, okay. What can you do? And I'm sure there are some sensei do this because I don't know whether they're afraid that their student they're going to lose their student to another dojo, which can happen. But the greater concern is probably they're going to come back and show something to the other students in the class that is not within their system, within their slice of the pie, and that's going to cause problems. And maybe cause other students to leave as well. So, I don't know. I don't know what the solution is, or maybe it's because if we go someplace with other martial artists, we as jujitsu sensei tend to sit there and just smile a lot, because we understand that they're just a piece of the pie, and we're holding the pie pan. Okay, that's
At the same time, though, it's fun to go to those other seminars and learn something from that narrow slice of pie that maybe they perfected that I don't know yet.
right.
And there's almost always something you can pick up from a seminar. If not,
Right, and
maybe you got to look at yourself and find out why you're not going in with an open mind, willing to learn.
right. Even if I go and teach someplace, I don't consider it the seminar a success unless I've learned something from the participants as well. And usually I'll pick up a technique or two or a different way of doing things that I haven't seen before. And to me, that makes the seminar a success. Because you have to have an open mind, and there are different ways to do things. Okay, I think we'll leave this at this point, and now we'll go to one of the things Will brought up in the last session where you emailed me. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Was it email?
Yeah, I emailed you afterwards, yeah.
It was an email that, and I don't know whether you call it, I think you call it situational awareness.
That's usually how I refer to it. Yeah, I just noticed that from the stories that the people were telling about their actual encounters,
Right.
the one polarity between all the stories was that they were either in a place they shouldn't have been in, or there was a cue that they should have picked up that they were ignoring.
Right.
And that's how I start. When we were running self-defense classes, we used to do a lot of women's self-defense and even co-ed self-defense classes, just bare basics. And that was always one of the first things that we would talk about is, generally speaking, as martial artists, we teach if your attacker does A, you do B, the counter. But let's back that up a few steps and find out, why were you there in the first place?
Correct.
That's where self-defense starts. It's like you don't go to that ATM at night. You don't drive through where they're actively protesting and you think there might be trouble there. You're not going to take that shortcut through the bad part of town. There's all these things that you shouldn't do, that you should do to protect yourself and keep yourself out of sketchy situations. Even as far as like the worst thing of all is our cell phones, right? You see people walking around, their eyes are buried in their phone, they got their earbuds in, they're totally clueless what's going on around them.
Right. And I don't know I'm willing to put this together if any of you have somewhere a list of situations to avoid. If you put it in a list, send it to me. I'll compile it and I'll get it out to everyone. Because I'm sure a lot of us are doing the same thing, but some of us may have items that we put on that list that others may not have, and we haven't thought of, because there really isn't any kind of document that probably could go on for pages of places or things you shouldn't be doing to reduce your chances of being attacked. And some of them are very small, but others are, like you said, you don't walk down a dark street at night. One thing I'll say, tell students is if you're in a questionable area and you've got a sidewalk, you keep yourself midway between the buildings and the vehicles. And you always walk on the side of this, and this is not being paranoid. Trick is not to make the person paranoid in the process, because that makes them a better victim. If you're walking down the street, you walk in the direction opposite to the cars that are parked on your side of the street, because that way you can look into the car to see what's in it before you get to it, in case there's someone hiding in a car who's going to jump out and attack you. Now that's real paranoia. But but on the other hand, it makes sense. But then again, you don't want to be close to a building, or because that might get you close to an alley, and an alley is, a lack of a better phrase, a red zone. You know, so you have to, part of it's, you know, some common sense.
Yeah, it's more. I like to think of it more of a heightened awareness than
Yes.
paranoia. But
Yeah.
you know, if you were looking to do evil, where would you hide? Look out for those spaces, like the alleys, bushes, whatever, behind cars.
Yeah. I've heard the phrase, not in recent years, but in early years, it's kind of like they say martial artists have a sixth sense. And as you say, it's a situational awareness, or just having a better idea of what's going on around you. If you've been in the military, you know what that is, because that's been essential to your survival. If you're in law enforcement, you know what that is, because it's essential to your survival. But most people, or lack of a better phrase, civilians, don't. They're just they're in their own world with, you know, their earbuds, cell phones, you know, talking to their friends.
Walking around with their hands in your pocket is
yeah, but that's part of body language. Yeah,
sure.
It's there isn't that awareness of what's going on around them. That is a critical part of self-defense training. One of the things I did, I think for a year, I was teaching at another junior college. I was teaching. I call it counter-assault training. I don't like the term self-defense, because to me, self-defense means after the fact. The counter-assault means they come at you, you're going to deal with them, and you know what you're going to do. Their final exam, because it was a class, and it was an evening class, and it was dark outside. So I would have them, I said, you're going to take a walk from this end of the campus to the next end. Okay, and I had enough black and brown belts where I got about 5 or 6 of them. And I said to the students, they're going to be wearing white tape around their head, white tape on their wrists and upper arms, and you may be attacked on your walk across campus. And some of the students were attacked 2 or 3 times. Some weren't attacked at all. And then we got back to class and talked about it. And that was their final exam. And many of them said that was really, you know, that was on the one hand, it was the scariest situation they had been in, because they didn't know if something was going to happen. So they were paying attention to what was going on around them. And I said, that's your number one self-defense skill. Now, I did also notify the campus police and the administration.
Who were the students or the attackers?
I didn't want the attackers to get, you know.
No.
Anyway, but you know, it's. I don't know whether you could get away with that today. But to me, if you were teaching a self-defense class in the evening, that would be the best final exam. You know, if you had enough upper belts that were willing to be attackers. And I told them, if you're attacked by someone who doesn't have white tape on them, give them hell. So anyway.
Something else that we've been talking about recently is, I don't know if you guys know who Tim Larkin is. He wrote a book recently, When Violence is the Answer. And he talks a lot about I guess the negative connotation of the term violence and using it. And he's like, one of his goals is to teach people, well, you know, it's just a tool. It can be used for evil, it can be used for good, but you need to learn how to use it so that you can defend yourself if need be. And one of the things he talks about is the difference between social violence and asocial violence. With social violence being the typical, a lot of verbal interaction, a lot of smack talk back and forth. I'm better than you, I'm bigger than you, that's my girlfriend, that's my parking spot, whatever. All that stuff's avoidable. And if you can avoid the confrontation, you do it, you talk your way out. The asocial violence is much more dangerous, and if there's rarely anything said, and it's just you're just attacked, and you have to deal with it. And that's where you've got to be willing to use your violence and use your techniques to do what you got to do to go home. And just understanding that difference in someone's intent and whether you need to get physical or if you can talk your way out of it is also, I think, an important distinction to learn.
Yeah.
If you're trying to talk your way out of an asocial situation, you're going to get pummeled.
I think
So-
I think that's a great point. We've previously talked in some other sessions about the effectiveness of what we refer to as quote unquote a verbal judo type
Right.
scenario and helping get out of that. But yeah, that makes absolute every bit of sense.
Yeah. I mean, if you can talk your way out, it really doesn't matter what you say. You can pick up those pieces later.
Sure.
If you're into an asocial, where you're physically attacked, you may not be able to pick up your pieces afterwards. And that's why it's always been, I would say whatever I needed to say to get out of a physical confrontation.
Yeah, his whole point is that it's just silly and there's no point in engaging. Just if you can walk away, buy the guy a beer, compliment is out, whatever you got to do.
Yeah.
Apologize and get out of there.
Right. The other thing but so if you can come up with a list of what's safe and what's unsafe things, places to avoid, stuff like that, I'll put it all together for you and get it out. It just might be interesting to see what other people have. The other item I wanted to cover under there was body language. It makes you a good or bad target. And a lot of this, surprisingly, some of it I got out of the first time I taught arrest and control for the state of Nevada back in the 80s. And somehow we got into body language, because as in law enforcement, you really have to watch the other person's body language. It's part of your situational awareness. And they came up with a term, well, these are some things we picked up from antisocial people who have had some time at University of California, San Quentin. That's where the UCSQ comes from, in case you didn't know from my notes. And it's kind of tongue in cheek, but the sad part is that a lot of our penal institutions, the inmates do learn valuable skills to further illegal activities. And part of that is, looking for body language for a good target. Some of the simpler ones are how the person is walking. Are they pigeon-toed, their toes outward? Are they taking small steps or hurried steps? Are they constantly looking around them? Body posture, are they slumped? Usually for a male, if their hands are turned, if their palms are facing backwards rather than sideways, that makes them a better target, because if their hands are turned backwards, that means their shoulders are forward, which means they're slumped, which means they're probably not in good physical shape. There are, if you're holding your arms across your body as you're walking, or you're clutching yourself, or your purse, or whatever else you're holding on to, if you're holding it against your body, that's a good sign that you're a better victim. And your clothing. If I've done like short self-defense classes, usually I'll get 3 women ahead of time to dress a certain way. I'll have one dress, one dress very conservatively, business-like. One dress really sexy, and one dress looking as slovenly as they can. And I'll say, which one is going to be the number one target on the street? Do any of you want to guess?
The slovenly one, the sloppy one.
Okay, you say sloppy one. Anyone else say sloppy one? Anyone say sexy one?
I would say sexy.
I would say that too. I mean, I actually saw a shirt that says, "In case of rape, this side up." How's that going to play in court?
What?
You know,
My thought was that if they're dressed sexy, that they've got a lot of confidence, and it's maybe somebody that you want to avoid.
Okay. Slovenly is number one. Because they of the three, they have the lowest self-image, which makes them the easiest victim.
Yep.
The sexy one is number two. The business model is someone you probably do not want to mess with because they know what they're doing and they know where they're going. So anyway, and it's amazing how many people pick sexy one as the number one target. Because they think that the person who looks slovenly, again, we're thinking from a normal set of values. And
Sorry, I think like a criminal apparently.
yeah, you have to think like a criminal. It's, you know, you have to have, if you're going to be successful on the street, you have to have a different mindset. And some of that same applies to if you're having a situational awareness. You have to be able to scan what's around you without looking paranoid and seeing what to avoid. I had a student in junior high school, total gangbanger, and apparently I really helped him. I helped him to learn how to read, etc. I'm not going to go through that story. But if you saw this guy walking down the street, you would cross the street just to avoid him. He looked like death 7 times over, you know. But he was a really nice guy. If you got below that exterior that he had, he was a really, you know, really good, to me, he was a really decent person. I found sometimes when you run into what we might normally consider a real low life, and you do run into them on the street, if you treat them with courtesy and respect, you get a much different reaction to them than if you turn to them and say, suck dirt. You know, it's, you know, again, it's your situational awareness. And as Will said, it works to diffuse the situation. It's a bit of verbal judo, or as I prefer to call it, verbal jujitsu. So anyway, but there are, you know, there are things that if you're teaching self-defense, I mean, a self-defense class, a person's appearance goes a long way to determine whether or not they're a victim on the street. Walking in groups is a good thing to do, particularly at night. But you don't want that group in a tight little huddle, because then they're all afraid. What else can I think?
We would talk about that a lot. You know, you walk with your head up and with confidence. Walk like you have a purpose. Sometimes
Right.
you're going to,
Yeah.
and don't be afraid to make eye contact with somebody,
No.
just so that they know that you know they're there.
Right. Eye contact is a very important factor. It doesn't mean, and some people will come after you for staring at them. So
Yeah, not talking about staring. I'm just making eye contact.
yeah, just if you just make a minimal eye contact and go on, you know, that's not part of their game. They'll leave you alone. But if you stare at them and look at them, then in some cases they interpret it as you're challenging them, and that's not a good thing to do. But again, it's your situational awareness and that's the most important thing that you can teach in a self-defense class. Is they just have to be aware of what's going on around them. We have it's called Next Door. It's a if you're familiar with it, it's on the internet.
Community.
Pardon?
It's like a community
Community thing.
thing. Yeah.
I hate to say it, I'm amazed at the stupid things people do.
Yes.
I mean, we live in an area where if you call the police, they're going to be there within a minute. We've got good coverage in our community. There are other communities, like where we used to live in North Hollywood, where if you called the police on a Friday or Saturday night, 20 minutes, maybe. And it's amazing the stupid things people do to put themselves in danger. And I think one lady, I said, you know, there were two guys going through her garage, and she went out and challenged them. And fortunately, they ran away. But was it the right thing to do?
Depends on if she had her shotgun with her.
What?
Depends on whether she had her shotgun or not.
Yeah, well, that might be excessive force if you shoot them in the back. Make sure they're facing you.
Just for the heck of it, I'll tell a quick story. So my kind of daughter-in-law, niece, whatever the heck so she's a Detroit cop, lives in Detroit. Actually, she's a sergeant now. She's a sergeant. But she was walking down at night with her friend, and she heard two guys coming up behind them, and they were talking. They're talking about, you take the tall one, I'll take the short one, kind of thing. And so she thought, well, we can walk faster, but that just shows you're afraid. It's body language. It's how you move. And I forget all of what she said, but she was just thinking body language the whole time. She pushed her friend out of the way, turned around, and put her hand here. That's where she carries her shoulder holster. She didn't draw anything. She just put her hand there. And she looked at them. They ran away. So body language. Didn't draw, didn't do anything. Body language can do a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I was in one situation at night once where a couple of guys came up to me, and my first, you know, I was wearing a jacket. So my first response was I put one hand behind my back. Under the jacket. And they turned around and went the other way.
You all know what that means. You
Yeah.
carry your gun.
Yeah,
In
I mean,
that holster.
I'm glad it worked.
Dangerous bluff if you're not carrying, though. And they decide to call you.
Can't do it in California.
Criminals do.
Yeah.
I could carry a jute off as long as it's not concealed, but in California. But anyway, okay. Is Irvin still there? Nope. Okay.
Camera goes off, but he's
Yeah.
still one.
Yeah, he had sent me an email a couple of days ago on, he was concerned about cross-certifying from another system of jiu-jitsu. And I said, well, I sent him the information, and I said, if you have any questions, you can bring them up on, oh, there you are. Urban, anyway, just if you had any questions on the cross-certification process or testing in Budoshin Jiu-Jitsu, were you able to look over the material, and do you have any questions?
Might not have the sound turned on.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's, Urban, you're muted.
Exactly.
well, we don't have any sound from him. So
I don't know if he knows that you're talking to him. He's not saying anything.
No.
There you go.
Hey, he's unmuted.
Irvin, were you able to look over any of the material I sent you on promotions? And do you have any questions at this point?
Thank you, Prof. Kirby. I think my opinion is about the BJJ and Japanese style. We can see the difference with the system. So because Japanese style, so many we learn about the technique, standing fight, weapon, and all. So we not focus on the ground, but BJJ we more focus on the ground. So if on the street Japanese style can be again more than one, but I think but BJJ only focus on only one opponent. So they BJJ focus on the ground, and they focus in the in the system and increase the all the technique of Jujitsu like that. So sometime today we learn example for the Japanese. Today we learn about the standing fight, and the other day we learn about the weapon. But for the BJJ, focus on the ground like that. Yeah, that is my opinion. Yeah, like this.
Okay,
Thank you, Prof.
we'll continue this by email or once you've had a chance to look over the material more closely. Do we have anything we want to bring up in the next session, or any thoughts for topics? Or
Let me just jump in very quick. Sensei, I saw some of your older videos on dealing with multiple opponents. And I think that was just raised. And there were, the Marine Corps taught strategies for multiple opponents. So I think you don't want to go to the ground, because then you're stuck. And so the multiple opponents question that Ivan just raised is important. That's all.
okay, one of the if you can visualize it, when I used to have larger classes, I would do this, and you do this only with brown and black belts. We had like it was either called the triangle of, students make up weird names for things. They'd call it the triangle of death or the circle of death. And we'd have one person standing in the middle defending. Okay, and you only do this with upper belts. And it's just to let them know that they and the art are not invincible. And you can start off, you can start off with one attacker and then have the other attacker, another attacker come in, a third attacker, and a fourth, but at some point you have the attacks coming at them so fast that they can no longer effectively defend themselves, and they end up on the ground, usually with two people on them. And it's just a good way to get them to realize that. I'll tell my students, if you have two attackers, if you have one attacker, you're probably going to come out okay. Two attackers, you're probably going to come out okay. Three attackers, you're in deep trouble. And it's once they go through that a couple times, no matter where their ego was, it really gives them a reality check. Because you don't want to be in a situation, and I said, this is why one of the things we teach you is it's how do you say it? It's if you have 2 or 3 people around you, you need to get out of that center. You've got to be on the side where you've got to be in the circle, not in the center of the circle. Number one. Secondly, the first person that attacks you. Well, secondly, you have to watch out. I refer to the term as a chihuahua. Okay, if you know what does a chihuahua do?
Nips at your heels.
It nips at your heels, right? And usually, it's the smallest guy that'll engage in the verbal confrontation and try, and he's not your real threat, but you have 2 choices. Number one, if you believe attack is imminent, physical attack is imminent, you either put a person, the closest person to you, or the person who attacks you first, into a control hold if you can, and get, and be able to use them as a shield and warn the others to back off, or you'll break his wrist or dislocate his shoulder or what have you, break his neck. And because you can control the pain level, you can really get this person to scream that they're dying. Or number 2, you have to do as much damage as you can to the first person to intimidate the other 2. And those are your 2 choices with multiple attackers. More than 2, because you don't want to have to deal with 3 people or more. And really, all you really have to do to win in most situations is to create doubt on the part of your opposition, and you've won. If you can create that doubt, you have a much better chance of winning. But in any case, I mean, that's
So real quick, here's what the Marines taught. You control the positioning so that you
Yes.
only have to fight one person at a time. And
Right.
the other people are backed off over there and they're in the way, and their guy is in the way. You only have to fight one at a time.
yes.
You fight one at a time. You deal with one, you deal with the next, you deal with the next. And it's controlling the position.
Right. If you can control the situation, you're going to be. Yes, you're right. And I do this with my students. I'll use a chalkboard, or I'll put them on the mat and say, these are, this is a situation. What are you going to do to get out of this situation before it becomes physical? And they learn to get out of the center real fast, because that's, you have no chance in the center. They get to the side, they get beyond the side, so that as you're saying, Gary, the attacker has to come to you.
One at a time.
One at a time.
And you don't let them gang up on you.
No. Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Right.
Sir.
Yeah. Once they've been through the gang up situation that I described previously, then they have a better appreciation, and they students are fast learners, especially if they've been piled on. And once they, how do you say it? Because I used to do a lot of, when I taught, I didn't like textbooks. I avoided them whenever I could, but I did a lot of simulations with my students. And, there were times when kids would get really upset and bent out of shape and upset with me. But then when we sat down and talked about it, they realized this is how I could have avoided this. Because I would create the situation. And they wouldn't be aware that I created this because it's the way the game is or situation is set up. But if you put a person through a situation, they have a much greater appreciation of how to avoid it in the future. And that's where training comes in. And that's why you have to put your students in those situations. So anyway, I have a shoulder replacement surgery on the 13th. My surgeon is right shoulder, and I'm fortunate.
Right. Okay.
Fortunately, I'm left-handed.
Oh, you're a tricky guy. You're left-handed.
Yes.
Now I've got to study better to deal with you.
Right. And you have to realize left-handed people have an advantage in many martial arts because all the attacks are coming at us right-handed. But anyway, how I feel, I'll keep you posted as to whether we will have the next session will be on the 24th, I believe. It's the 3rd and 14th. Today is the 3rd.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, I would put it on the 17th. I'm probably going to probably move it right now to the next weekend, 24th. And I'll see how that, if I don't think the 24th is doable, I'll let everyone know.
Quick, I had this friend and she was national champion fencer. Woman, national champion. She was left-handed. Nobody knew how to fight a left-handed fencer. So she beat everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, are any of you left-handed?
Here.
1 out of 6. Well, we're 2 out of 7. That's within the that's better than 25%. That's about right. My classes are about 25%. Even I've had classes or seminars as high as 30% left-handed. But
Not left-handed here, Sensei, but I do just about everything left-handed except for right.
Pardon?
I'm not left-handed, but I do just about everything left-handed except for right.
Yeah. I mean, some people are ambiguous. I mean, yeah, not ambiguous.
Ambidextrous.
What's the term?
Ambidextrous.
Ambidextrous. I when I was in high school, I used to work in a custom machine shop, and the boss, who was always impressed because I could take 2 screwdrivers and do, give me two tools. I could do the same thing with 2 hands, and he'd stand there and watch. He'd stand there and watch me. Or in the classroom, I'd write on the chalkboard with my right hand, and I could do a really nice backwards. I could write backwards really nice with my right hand. Drove the kids crazy. Anyway.
Darren, your situation is called mixed dominance, and it's an advantage for helping both sides of your brain.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's all disadvantage.
Anyway, I think we should leave now while we're ahead.
Okay, so I want to we got a couple minutes, and I know I've signed on late and I've missed all this stuff, and I sign on late because I'm doing my other classwork. I'd like everybody to say their name. Sensei, I know you. Your name and your age and like what part of the country you're in, just so we can kind of get to know each other. And I'll say, I'm in Ann Arbor, grew up in Detroit, hard scrabble, and I'm 67. That's me. And all the martial arts of, and stick fighting. And I was a hand grappler and all that wrist stuff. So who else are the rest of you? Just like so we get to know each other so I can get to know you. It just only take a second. Please do.
Sure, I'll start if you want. I'm Will. This is my friend Mike. We've known each other probably for over 30 years. We're in Baltimore, Maryland.
I've heard of Baltimore. I've even been there. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Dave. Go on.
I'm Darren.
Anyway,
I'm Darren Mellory, New Orleans, Louisiana. Traditional Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. Been knowing Sensei Kirby for multiple years now. Honor and pleasure always to be involved in his programs, and happy to be
I've
here
been
as
to
well.
New Orleans just before the big storm came through. And then up in all those places, I work with people who do boats. Okay,
Urban, where are you from?
good. You're a young guy.
That's right, he can't hear.
Me?
No, I was going to ask Urban, but he's got his sound down.
Oh, so that's Ivan. Yeah, he's got his sound down. He's a young guy.
I don't admit this to everybody, but I'm from Florida, and I'm Dave Clark. I've enjoyed working with Sensei Kirby for pushing a couple decades, and enjoyed every moment of it. He's like a brother, a father, and that unusual uncle all at the same time. And
Funny.
our son Logan has enjoyed working with him.
Sorry.
I'm Stuart Burke, Arlington, Virginia. I just turned 64.
Youngster.
Speaking of birthdays, Sensei Kirby, happy birthday last month, 17th.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Had corned beef and cabbage. Adele is my wife. She's an excellent cook. And if any of you know what poppy seed strudel is, she's an even better baker. I think for Easter, she made bear claws. This does not help my weight problem.
All that's going to do like the belly for me.
Yeah, right. Okay, who do we have?
And
Irvin, you want to introduce? Ivan? Irvin.
Yes,
Anu.
yes.
Where are you?
Sorry?
Irvin, where are you from? What country?
I cannot hear. The connecting is not good here. I'm sorry.
Where do you live?
Where do you live?
Oh yes. I live in Jakarta, Indonesia.
Oh, Jakarta.
Yes.
Okay.
Salamat.
Selamat dah. Yes. Good evening. Selamat malam.
Yeah, it is late. It is late in Indonesia. It is late. It is at night in Indonesia right now, isn't it?
Hey, thank you all for giving a little introduction. And I know I've been kind of out of touch for a while, and just I appreciate y'all telling me, who you are and a little bit of your background. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's very helpful, actually.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're gonna bid adieu here, and anyway, I'll tell you one last story, and we're gonna part. Years ago, I did a seminar up in Canada. I think it was actually for the Edmonton Police Department, where we used their facility, and for some reason, I checked off the immigration papers incorrectly, and I got stuck in immigration in Canada. And I didn't get to the immigration agent who was going to do the inquisition until like 1 a.m. And they had my luggage, etc. And they apparently my luggage was a whole box of Kubotans, because that was going to be part of the training. And they said, "What are these for?" And I said, after we had this discussion, and it was the guys. He was a brand new immigration agent, so I didn't get upset with him, and it turned out to be, he asked the questions, I answered them. Life went on. He says, he gets on the phone, he comes back, he says, "Would you do a Kubotan demonstration for us?" So at the Edmonton International Airport, a huge room, they brought in all the immigration officials, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, I did a demonstration on the use of the Kubotan. And they said, "Okay, you can go now." So anyway, with that happy thought, I'll let everyone go. Have a great week. Stay out of trouble as best you can, and give my best to your students. Okay.
All right. Thanks.
Hey, guys.
Take care. Take
Bye,
care.
everyone.
Goodbye.
Thank you all.